Hello.
Can you start over?
Start all over. We apologize, we're going through it again. Some of you may know it by the time we finish.
We had the dispense with the reading of the minutes, and we had a motion by Trippier and a second by James Bisbee.
Yep.
And the motion carried unanimously.
All right. Now we're going over our introduction. The Historic Preservation Commission is a public commission appointed by the City of New Bern's Board of Aldermen. It is responsible for preserving and safeguarding New Bern's locally designated historic districts, downtown and riverside, based on U.S. Department of Interior standards, state statutes, city ordinances, and the New Bern Historic Guidelines. Two of the major tasks of the HPC include approving applications for a certificate of appropriateness and preventing demolition of historic structures due to neglect. The HPC holds a quasi-judicial hearing on an application for a certificate of appropriateness. The Commission hears sworn testimony and evidence provided by the applicant, by parties who receive notice of the hearing, and by others who can justify that they have relevant evidence and are directly affected by the application. The Commission cannot consider comments based on personal likes or dislikes, hearsay, or personal opinion that cannot be directly related to specific historic guidelines. Likewise, Commissioners shall refrain from stating personal opinions, personal likes or dislikes, or hearsay during a hearing. The Commission's decision on an application is based solely on testimony and evidence presented at a hearing that directly relates to historic guidelines. So anyone who wishes to speak tonight, if you come forward to up here where Matt is and you need to be sworn in and to sign up. I see it. I'm going to do it. You all are being very Southern gentlemen with the signing in. Okay, I will go over the process that we use, but before I even do that, I want to see if there are any adjustments to the agenda today. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4 items. As far as we know, are all 4 of those people coming? Are 4 of those people here? Are the bike share people here? Okay, is Chain Street here? Is 405 Johnson Street here? Is Federal Alley here?
Yes, ma'am.
That's you. Okay, so we've got all 4. So we're going to start going over that so that if someone is waiting for a particular application to look at and in actual fact it has been dismissed, we don't want them having to sit through the whole evening unless they really just want to hear all these applications, which maybe someone does, waiting for that, and then it doesn't show up. So that's why we're going through that, just to make sure that we've got everybody here for the application.
Madam Chair, we also have people representing item 7A.
Item 7A.
16 to 18 Wright Street.
Okay, that's the extension of the COA.
That's correct.
Okay, and they're here as well. Okay, all right. The other thing I want to do is introduce a new member to us, sitting over here on my left, Mr. Tim Thompson. Over here, he's a new board member, and we have one other new board member who's not here tonight. So just wanted you to know who Tim was. And we appreciate you being here tonight, so we had a call. Okay. All right, so here's how we're going to proceed tonight. The HPC administrator provides an overview of the application, and the applicant or the applicant's representative can present the application as well if they want to. Proponents and opponents who receive notice of the hearing can present evidence should they wish to. Rebuttal is allowed by the applicant and by proponents and opponents who receive notice. Others who can justify that they have relevant information and will be directly affected can present evidence. The HPC administrator presents the staff's findings and the recommendations. The applicant or the representative has an opportunity to make a final comment on their application should they wish to do so. The commissioners here will then discuss the evidence and may ask for clarification from the applicant or the presenter. The chairman will call for a motion to approve or deny the application with stated findings of fact. The motion is discussed by the commissions. The chairman calls for a vote on the motion by the commission. A COA can be approved, disapproved. It can be approved with condition, or as I said, it can also be continued. Okay? So we will go now. So we've done all the introductory things. So we'll go now to the first applicant, and that's the bike share person. That's you, sir.
Yes.
So we will let Matt give us an overview of the application.
Okay. On your screens, you can see this is the application for one of the locations for this project. This project has 3 locations that they're looking for approval for this evening. The first one is 300 East Front Street. The second one is 504 South Front Street. And the third one is 902 and 904 Pollock Street. So here's the application for the first site, the 300 East Front Street, which is also known as the Galley Store down on East Front Street. The gas station and store there. I have a signed application actually on my desk here in the room, and this is the owner's authorization. This is an illustrate or photograph of the area where it's going to be installed. Instead of the bike rack that's there, there will be these bike stations, ports. We'll see in a second what that means. And then the next application for 504 South Front Street. And the information is the same on all of these. Here we have the applicant's signature and the owner's authorization. Here's photographs of the existing stations are to be installed. And then, this was their photograph from the last time of the location. Here shown as these black marks. Maybe you can see them, maybe you can't. Again, I think we have some more illustrations later that the applicant brought with him this evening. And then 904 Pollock Street. And signed and dated, and there again we have the owner's authorization form, and now we have some photographs of that location right here at this corner of Pollock and Fleet Street. And then looking up Pollock Street, it's essentially down here at the bottom of this photograph, this corner. And then again, looking back the other direction on Pollock Street towards Fleet Street. So there's an L-shaped location here. And this is shown again with some drawings on this drawing, black line shown on this drawing, but they have some more drawings here this evening. So to give you an idea of what we're talking about, these are some of the information from the product literature. So each individual bike gets one of these bike racks. So one bike with two posts, and the bike slips underneath these, and they just plug into this.
They lock in.
They lock in there. And so here's an idea of what we're talking about. Unfortunately, there's the OBS tutorials over top that you see. It's one bike with the two posts, and there's a concrete pad underneath. To the right, that is just a shadow on the concrete pad. The concrete pad shown here for the entirety of that area behind the bicycles. All right. And so here are some drawings of the standard configurations for these pads. And again, you can see there's some good amount of pad space behind the bicycles. And the typical size for these are that they're 10 feet from the front of the bike to back behind the bike, and then there's various lengths of them depending on how many of these stations they have. I don't believe they're proposing.
Yes, we're going to do that at Bury the Hatchet.
Oh, at Bury the Hatchet, it'll be this configuration where it's alternating front and back. So let's see. Okay, and so we have how you attach them. You just drill them into the concrete, hammer in bolts when you're done, and here's a picture of a bicycle. Oops.
fully drawn to scale.
So you're showing 6 of them there?
6.
So you're going to have 6?
Yes, ma'am, 6.
Okay, 6.
This would be at the Barry the Hatchet site. So it would be over here at the corner of Hancock and South Front. We would have up to 12 at that location.
Okay, it looks like some of that line is crossing the sidewalk. Do you mean to do that?
No. One of that may be the sidewalk itself, the little gap in the sidewalk.
So, I can clarify, it appears he's showing that staggered pattern.
Oh, over there.
Right?
Oh, okay.
Right, staggered. And so that's why he's saying at Barry the Hatchet, which is this location, 504 South Front Street, that the bicycles will be stacked in both directions like this.
Okay.
Right, and there'll be apparently 6 on each side.
Up to
for a total of
6 docking stations.
Yeah, up to 6 on each side for a total of 12 docking stations.
Okay. On their property at that corner.
And so essentially in a big long row along there.
Okay. All right.
And the third one,
For the freshwater site, so for the freshwater site, they will be individuals, and they start up here on the Fleet Street side with up to 7 going down the street, and then up to 5 going across on Pollock Street.
Okay. And how you've drawn it is how you're going to distribute them.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah? Okay, anything else you want to show us about these pictures?
No, ma'am.
Okay.
That's all I have.
All right, so is there any conflict of interest from anyone on the commission? Seeing none. Are there any issues with the completeness of the application? Seeing none. Okay. Are there any notified proponents out in the audience? Don't see any. Are there any notified opponents out in the audience? I don't see any, so there's no rebuttal here. So is there anybody with relevant evidence that has standing? Don't see anyone. Is there anyone from the city, state, or government body out in the audience? Don't see any. Okay. So we've covered everybody else who might want to speak. So if we could have information, sir, that you all have come up with.
Sure.
What your findings are.
Recommendations. So we did one of these recommendations for each of the locations because there was some different background information for each. So for 300 East Front Street, we have the historic property name is not applicable, it's non-contributing, and there is no description of it in the National Register inventory or the Sandbeck book. So for 300 East Front Street, the proposal is to include installation of bicycle docking stations in the Primary AVC. So staff submits the following historic district guidelines are appropriate to this application. Whoops. There we go. Sorry. Don't worry, I won't have to redo that. All right, let's just make it bigger. Following guidelines are appropriate to this application for public and open spaces 2.2.2 and for metal 5.3.3. The statements of reason based on the information contained in the application in staff's judgment are: 1, the project is located in the waterfront development pattern. 2, the proposal is a bike rack-like rental bike docking stations. 3, the proposed design components and materials meet the requirements of guidelines. 4, the zoning administrator and the chief building official have reviewed this project and commented accordingly. And 5, the project recommends the commission approve this application to include installation of bicycle docking stations in the primary AVC. For the second one, 504 South Crux Street. The historic property name is Farmer's Supply House. It is a contributing structure. The National Register inventory description from 2003. It was built 1925, the building. One-story brick, continuous display windows and entrance in the south facade, 3 bays deep, concrete block rear wing, and stepped parapets in the side elevations. Sand deck description is not available at the time I wrote this. If you want that, I can look it up. I brought the book with me. 504 South Front Street is, project is to include installation of bicycle docking stations in the primary AVC. Staff submits the following historic district guidelines are appropriate to this application. Public open spaces, 2.2.2, and metal, 5.3.3. The statements of reason based on the information contained in the application and staff's judgment are: 1, the project is located in a dense fabric development pattern. The proposal is a bike rack rental bike docking stations. The proposed design, components, and materials meet the requirements of the guidelines. 4, the zoning administrator and the chief building official have reviewed this project and commented accordingly. And 5, the project is not incongruous with the guidelines. Staff recommends the commission approve this application to include installation of bike docking stations in the primary AVC. For the third location, 902 and 904 Pollock Street, historic property name is unknown. Contributing status is to be determined, and National Register inventory description is not available, and same with sand deck description is not available. 902 and 904 Pollock Street to include installation of bicycle docking stations in the primary AVC. Staff submits the following historic district guidelines are appropriate to this application. Public and open spaces, 2.2.2, and metal, 5.3.3. Statements of reason based on the information contained in the application and staff's judgment are: 1, the project is located in the tightly development pattern. 2, the proposal is a bike rack rental bike docking stations. 3, the proposed design, components, and materials meet the requirements of the guidelines. 4, the zoning administrator and chief building official have reviewed this project and commented accordingly. And 5, the project is not incongruous with the guidelines. So staff recommends the commission approve this application to include installation of bicycle docking stations in the primary AVC. That concludes our recommendations.
Okay. So before we move forward, I know there was some discussion with our legal attorney over here about what kind of zoning classification this was, and if there was some specific type of documentation that was needed. Has that been resolved in what he has already read?
No, ma'am. I will say that there's been some continued dialogue between the city attorney's office and the planning department late this evening.
Right.
So that is a matter that's still being untangled. It may be appropriate, if you're inclined to approve the COA, to conditionally approve it at the condition that the applicant should apply with any applicable zoning regulations, which would cover all bases in the event that there's a resolution to the matter that you're speaking of.
Okay, so if we decided to approve it, then that would be one of the conditions of the approval. And then you would have to, who is he going to have to get with? He's going to have to get with zoning?
Yes.
Okay, all right. You understand what she's saying, sir?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right, do you have anything else that you would like to present at this point in time?
No, ma'am.
Okay, all right. Anybody on the commission have any questions at this point in time? Comments?
In the information that you provided, it speaks to bike location. The recommendation, we recommend installing the bikes in a location that's not easily seen from the street or accessible. In 2 of the 3 cases, you're not doing that. I'm interested to know what their thought was in recommending not doing that and what your thought is in recommending doing it.
As in putting them,
Putting them right on the street.
that way they're easily seen by the tourists and residents when they're walking up and down the street.
Why do they not recommend doing that, though? It's right in your literature.
Can you pull that back up, Matt?
on the first page.
You read it before, Matt. Yeah, right
Right
there.
there at the bottom.
Yeah.
So it does sit above that. So the third last bullet, best locations of those most convenient to riders such as near building entrances or exits, more likely bikes are to get used.
I think it means.
That is from the vendor itself, not,
I think they're talking about security there, because the following bullet point says, if possible, recommend using camera surveillance. So I believe that the bullet point above that is referring to easily accessible from the street, potential,
And-
theft.
we have talked with both the city of Danville, who currently has these bikes, and they have had no issue with theft in the locations that they have. And there are cameras within the premises on all 3 locations.
And I think we talked a little bit about this in design review, but what happens in the event that all of the bikes end up at one location, exceeding the stanchions?
So they'll have to go back to it, in order, it'll be checked out for that person until it gets back to a docking station. So if there's none available at that location, then they'll have to go back to another, and on the app, it'll let them know how many openings are at each docking station.
On the app, did you say?
Yes.
So they can pull up, once they get this bike, they can pull up something?
Yes, everything's going to be app-based, so they'll be able to see how many bikes are available at each docking station on the app.
Okay. Okay, any other questions at this point in time? Now, did you say in the application that you were putting down new cement blocks? Maybe blocks is not the word, but
So at Berry and Hatchet, we will be installing concrete there. At the other 2 sites, we'll be using existing concrete.
existing concrete?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right. Does anybody else have any questions about this application? Hearing none. Does anybody want to make a motion for this application?
Let's see, I move that we find the application for a certificate of appropriateness for 300 East Front Street, 504 South Front Street, and 902-904 Pollock Street to be not incongruous with New Bern's Code of Ordinance, Sections 15411 to 15429, and New Bern's Historic District Guidelines based on the following specific guidelines: public and open spaces 2.2.2 and metals 5.3.3. Findings of fact being each of these locations, in fact one of each is in the waterfront district, the tight weave district, and the dense fabric district. The proposal is a bike rental business with docking stations. Design, components, and materials meet the requirements of the guidelines. The zoning administrator and the chief building official have reviewed the project, commented accordingly, and then lastly, the project is not incongruous with the guidelines.
And the condition is that they will abide by...
The applicant will-
If we feel that is truly necessary, yes, the applicant has to comply with all ordinance and codes in the city of New Bern.
zoning codes.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Second.
As a condition.
Okay. All right. Does anybody else have anything they want to add to it? Okay. So we've had a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second over here. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Hearing none, the motion passed. Can I have a motion to issue a COA?
So move.
Have over here, Tony, so moved. We have a second?
Second.
Second, Tim, thank you. All of those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, the COA can be issued, sir. With the understanding that before you can do anything, you have to come back to see Matt about the zoning issue. You understand that?
Yes.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Who made the second on the primary motion?
Jim.
Thank you.
Coming to the big table, are you? It's nice to have
Okay,
you up
so
here.
the next one is 206 Chain Street.
Correct. So, for 206 James Street, you have on the screen, you have application. And it is signed and dated. And you also have the owner's authorization form signed and notarized. With the description of the work on several pages here. The first bullet is for removing brick paving out front, constructing a raised brick planter. The second one is for the work in the tertiary AVC to remove a section of wide brick steps, to construct a wood pergola with the patio, to add rock railing, to cap the existing raised planter with brick pavers, and to install a hot tub. And then at the accessory structure in the tertiary AVC to construct a wood pergola in front of the structure, the garage. So they cite various guidelines, 2 pages worth. The list of materials is also here. And they provide copies out of the Sandbeck book. It is the Rebecca Delestatius house. And I'll be summarizing that in my recommendation. So this site plan gives us a overview of the project. So I'll start here actually at the bottom of this drawing and work up. So the front of the house is at the bottom here, with the street actually at the bottom of this drawing. And so the black bubble area is the area where the work will be occurring, plus that includes the note for that, for out front to remove the brickwork and replace it with a brick planting wall, garden wall. And then the next area is at the back porch area, location 2 noted here. And we'll see the changes in a minute, but this gives you an idea of where those changes are in the site. And then lastly, location 3 is the new trellis along the front of the garage at the back of the site. All right. So here's some photos of the house itself. And the work here at the front of the house is the brick paving that's out front next to the sidewalk, between the sidewalk and the wall for the house. And we'll get a couple of views of that here. It's the actual straight on at the front. So you get maybe a little better idea of the actual brickwork that's there. And this also. And lastly, there is some steps going to the gate on the side of the house. So, and back from the other angle. In the back of the house, there currently is a brick patio or deck. And the proposal is to basically fill in the steps solid, flat across. And on the left, where we have the plants and pots, is to cover that planting area over with brick and put a hot tub on there. And we'll see more drawings of this in a second. And from the side view, these steps will remain, yes, with some handrails will be added. On this side, on the left-hand side, there's no changes, I believe. Maybe some handrails. And that's the planting area that will be covered over and become base for the hot tub. Then the garage is currently looks like this, and we'll have the arbor or trellis in front of it. So location 1 again, a little bit more detail here. And so this is the proposal, a sketch of the proposal. So it'll be a low brick garden wall to allow for planting essentially is the same length as the actual front of the house, which is to say it does not interfere with that few steps that we saw in front of the gate, which is underneath all the letters on the right-hand side of this drawing. And then on the back, this is a more detailed view of the plan. This is the top one is the existing condition with all the steps in 3 different directions and the existing planter. And then the plan is to fill in the steps that go directly to the bottom, as shown here with the red brickwork. And then there will be a pergola added over that area. And then also the hot tub on the left, and then the handrail, single handrail down on the steps to the right. So this is an elevation view of that work. And you can see that the infill of the bricks is flush with the existing patio elevation. And this also shows the handrails and the pergola. You can see the pergola is just taller than the doors back of the house. And this is a nice three-dimensional view. Yay. Put this all together and see how this works. And we have the notes here for the balusters are 4 inches on center, which will give us our more or less 3-inch clearance between them. And they're proposing some clematis to grow up onto the new pergola. And then lastly, for the garage, the plan view at the top and the elevation on the bottom here. In this case, peppermint grape to grow on top of that trellis. The right hand next to above the word grape is another elevation view, which gives you an idea of the depth of this trellis. That it's not a pergola, it's not very deep at all. 30 inches total, and is only the posts are only 12 inches away from the garage. So it's relatively minimal change there. And in this case, you also now see on the elevation, the front elevation, how it fits or how it intersects with the actual elevation side of the front of the garage. And then they provided an example of the other ironwork that they have already at the house. So they'll be doing a similar style to this, albeit probably a lot more closer together on the verticals. All right. And then we have our zoning and inspections review. So for this, the zoning administrator said that it does meet the requirements of the land use ordinance, and the chief building inspector says it will not require a building permit. And then after that, we're ready with our recommendations.
Okay. Do we have any conflict of interest here on the commission? Seeing none. Any issues with the application, the completeness of the application? Hearing none. So do you all wish to present anything else about the application? No? Okay. Do we have any notified proponents in the audience? No. Opponents in the audience? No. So there's no rebuttal there. Is there anyone with relevant evidence and has standing in the audience? Don't see anybody. Anybody from the state, city, or government body in the audience? Don't have none. We have none. So, sir, if you could give us the staff findings.
Okay, so these are the findings and recommendations for 206 Change Street. The historic property name is Rebecca Isaac's Elastatius house and garage. Both the house and the garage are contributing structures. So the National Register inventory describes the house was built circa 1810, 1830 modifications, and 1890 to 1900 modifications. So they describe it as 2.5 stories, 5 bays wide, double-story front porch, gable end roof, and 2-story rear wing. The garage was built circa 1924, 206 Change Street is to include 2 pergolas, patio pavement extension, hot tub, front paving replaced with raised planter in all of the AVCs, well, I guess the primary and tertiary AVCs. Staff submits the following historic district guidelines are appropriate to this application. For landscaping, 2.4.3, 2.4.7, for fences and garden walls, 2.5.1, 2.5.2, for accessory structures, 2.6.1, 2.6.3, for modifications, 3.2.1, for entrances, 4.4.4, for masonry, 5.1.1, 5.1.2, for metal, 5.3.3, 5.3.4. Although we could probably strike 5.3.4, you're not doing any aluminum. Okay, so strike that one. Paint, 5.4.2, 5.4.3, and 5.4.4. Statements of reason based on the information contained in the application and staff's judgment are: 1, the project is located in the tight weave development pattern. 2, the project is accessory structures, patio revisions, landscaping, and a garden wall. 3, the proposed design components and materials meet the requirements of the guidelines. 4, the zoning administrator and chief building official have reviewed this project and commented accordingly. And 5, the project is not incongruous with the guidelines. So staff recommends the commission approve this application to include 2 pergolas, patio pavement extension, hot tub, front paving replaced with raised planter in the primary and tertiary AVCs.
Good. Does the applicant have any other information they'd like to share at this point in time? Hearing none, we will move on. Do the members of the commission have any questions that they'd like to ask?
I did have a question about the plantings. There's dwarf camellia in the front garden wall.
Yes.
Do you know what the mature height of those would be?
Well, they can be pruned, of course, but the height of the brick up to the deck boards on the porch is about 4 feet. And so if we add an 18-inch planter, those will come up probably about 3 feet, and that's where we're going to keep them, maintain them.
Any other questions from anyone? Anybody? Okay. Hearing no questions, does someone want to make a motion?
Sure.
Thank you, Jim.
I move we find the application for, what's the address?
206 Change.
206 Change Street, for a certificate of appropriateness for 206 Change Street to be not incongruous with New Bern's Code of Ordinances, sections 15.411 and 15.429, and New Bern's Historic District Guidelines based on the following specific guidelines and findings of fact. Landscaping 2.4.3 and 2.4.7, fences and garden walls 2.5.1 and 2, accessory structures 2.6.1 and 2.6.3, modifications 3.2.1, 4.4.4, masonry 5.1.1 and 2, metal 5.3.3, paint 5.4.2, 3 and 4. Statements of fact: the project's located in the tight weave development pattern. Project is accessory structures, patio revisions, and landscaping and a garden wall. Proposed design, components, and materials meet the requirements of the guidelines. Zoning administrator and the chief building official have reviewed the project and commented accordingly. Project is not incongruous with the guidelines.
Okay. And just to make sure that we are aware that we're also approving the plantings that have been specifically identified for this. And nobody has any questions with that. You were satisfied with your answer?
Yes.
Okay. All of those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Opposed?
Oh, sorry, second, yes.
Second.
Second right here. All of those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, the motion passed. Can I have a motion to issue a COA?
So moved.
So we got so moved, we got second over here with Candace. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, the motion passed. I bet that's the fastest one you've ever had. With that, and you haven't said one word. Well, but that is to speak to how well you all presented this material in design review. So we knew exactly what we were getting. We asked you to bring certain drawings, and you brought those, and that's what happens when everybody cooperates with everybody else. We're done. Okay, all right, get with Matt about that. All right, thank you so much for making that beautiful.
Yeah.
Okay, so we got 405 Johnson Street.
Correct. All right, so we're looking at this on the screen at the application, and the proposal is to remove the wooden steps and build new brick steps. And the application is signed and dated, and we have the owner's authorization for the representative, and they started the project with finding these old photographs of their house, and it shows that the wooden steps were not there these many years ago, and so they decided they would prefer the wooden steps, so they would like to revert back to those wooden steps. I'm not sure why that photo is there, but so now they've provided, this is a photograph of the existing step. I'm sorry, did I misstate that?
You said that
You said
backwards.
it backwards, but we knew.
We knew
We
what you
knew.
meant.
Existing wood steps, and I would like to replace them.
Right, right. We knew.
All right. So, these are the existing wood steps, and, and the existing wood handrails, which I think somewhere in my documentation I thought it included handrails, but no, just the steps, just the wood steps being replaced by brick. Very simple project. And they provided a very good sketch of what that would look like. And even a side view here, which took some nice artwork to recreate the whited out portion of the handrails. And so that's all there is. We have our zoning inspection review, which shows that the zoning administrator says it meets the requirements of the land use ordinance, and the chief building inspector says it will not require a building permit. And then we're ready with our recommendations.
All right. Is there any conflict of interest from anyone? No. Does anyone have any issues with the completeness of the application? Is there anything else? Opponents in the audience? Proponents in the audience? We don't have any. Those with relevant evidence that has standing in the audience? There are not any. People from the city, state, and government body? There are not any. So I think we're back to you with the staff findings.
Okay. I'll make this paper again. I'll read this. All right, 405 Johnson Street. The historic property name is the Stanley Allen House. It is a contributing structure. The National Register inventory indicates it was built circa 1810, just like the previous house. 1843 remodel, or actually enlargement, and 1891 remodel. So it's 2.5 stories, 3 bays wide, pediment, porch, steep, gable front attic with patterned shingles and gabled side dormers. Sandbag description, and I realize we're just talking about steps, but the description of the house is very interesting for the Historic Preservation Commission. So I did pull out some things that I thought might be interesting to you. It was built circa 1810. It was enlarged in 1843, and you'll hear about that in a second, and it was remodeled circa 1891. That's all before most buildings were built in this town. So anyhow, quote from Sandbeck is, this 2.5-story federal house, enlarged during the Greek Revival period, was first owned and probably built for John Carruthers Stanley, referred to in Miller's recollections as, quote, one of the most prominent free persons of color in New Bern. Remember, 1810, so a week before emancipation. So then as originally constructed, the house was only the width of the 2 left windows, with an entrance entrance door located between the two window openings. The house was most likely given its present exterior enlarged size just after it was purchased by Eliza Allen in 1843. There's an 1863 photo in Santa. The pattern shingle work and gables and full-width front porch were probably added shortly after 1891 when the house was purchased by Morty and Marks, who had just built the house next door, and is also noted, I'm going to continue adding, also noted for the decorative shingle work in the gable.
Okay.
So that's how they probably figured that. Anyhow, so that said, had nothing to do with front porch steps.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So the project for 405 Johnson Street is to include replacing the wooden front steps with brick steps and not any wooden handrails in the primary AVC. So staff submits the following historic district guidelines are appropriate for this application. For modifications 3.2.1, for entrances 4.4.2, and that one was just for the handrails. So skip 4.4.4, masonry 5.1.1 and 5.1.2, and paint was for the handrails also, so skip those, all three of those. So statements of reason based on the information contained in the application and staff's judgment are: 1, the project is located in the tight weave development pattern. The project is replacing the front porch steps. 3, the proposed design components and materials meet the requirements of the guidelines. 4, the zoning administrator and chief building official have reviewed this project and commented accordingly. And 5, the project is not incongruous with the guidelines. So staff recommends the commission approve this application to include replacing wooden front steps with brick steps in the primary AVC.
Okay, does the applicant have any other comments you want to make at this time? No? Okay, members, do you have any questions about this? Any comments? No? Okay. Do I have a motion?
I move that we find the application for a certificate of appropriateness for Johnson, Matt, can you spell it?
Oh, sorry, 405 Johnson.
405 Johnson
405
Street.
Johnson Street.
Mhm.
Okay. With the New Bern Code of Ordinance sections 15-1411 to 15-429 and New Bern's Historic District Guidelines based on the following specific guidelines and findings of fact. Modifications 3.2.1, entrances 4.4.2, 4.4. Is that one you dropped?
Yeah.
Yeah. Masonry 5.1.1, 5.1.2, skipping down. For statements of reason, based on information obtained in the application and staff's judgment, the project is located in the tight weave development pattern. The project is replacing the front porch steps and handrail. The proposed design components and materials meet the requirements of the guidelines. The zoning administrator and the chief building official have reviewed this project and commented accordingly. The project is not incongruous with the guidelines.
Okay.
Second, you said replace the handrail, but he's not replacing the handrail.
Oh, that's it. Sorry.
Okay. So we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Yes.
Second, yes.
Second? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay. All those opposed? Hearing none, the motion passed. Can we have a motion to issue a COA?
So move.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second. Tim, thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any opposed? Hearing none, you can be issued a COA.
Thank you.
Okay, all right. And again, this is just an example of things moving right along. Y'all didn't have to say a word because of what they presented to us at design review, which was exactly what they brought to us and we asked for. Thank you very much. Makes things move along quickly. Okay.
Oh, you guys want the drawings back?
Are you federal, Alan?
I am federal, right?
Actually, they've got better diagrams.
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. We in the classroom.
So while we're getting organized, Madam Chair, I have a conflict of interest as I will be presenting the next application.
Okay. So can we have a motion to recuse you, please?
Motion to recuse Commissioner Yore,
since he is the applicant here.
Thank you. All of those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, you are recused, sir.
Who seconded that?
Okay, sir, if you'd like to give us some information on Federal Alley.
All right, so here we have our application. The applicant is MBF Architects. The owner is the city of New Bern. And the application is signed and dated. And we have our owner's authorization signed and notarized. And make this. So this is the first of 2 pages of drawings. So at the top, we see essentially the side of Morgan's Restaurant, which abuts Federal Alley on the east end. And so the street would be on the left-hand side. As you can kind of see, that's the tallest part of the building, and the facade is on that end. And then it tapers down as it gets towards the back. They have an enlarged portion at the front of the building, which is offset to the upper left corner here, to show they're proposing to add some signage, such as the name of the Federal Alley and some other plaques on there. Then the other things to note on this elevation especially are these strange bird footprints on the side of the building. Right? Some great big dinosaurs decided to put their feet on the side of the building. Those are the subject of this, in addition to the signage. So the bottom drawing basically shows a plan view of the alley, which includes showing that there are a bunch of mechanical units along there, and the alley is rather narrow. We'll see that in a second. The next sheet shows some perspective drawings and 2 elevations. So the 2 perspective drawings are probably self-explanatory here at this point. These are steel structures that are attached to the Morgan's Restaurant building down the alley over top of these units. Plus, there is some new paving being added along this alley. As you probably know, it's currently a dirt alley. So we see a second illustration showing a taller angle view. And then we have 2 elevations showing the design for these, and then also from the side or from the front, and then also the pergola elevation. So those are the application. So we have our zoning and inspections drawing. Yes. The zoning administrator says it meets the requirements of the land use ordinance, and the chief building inspector says it will not require a building permit. So then we're ready with our recommendations.
Okay. So we've dealt with the one conflict of interest that we had. Are there any issues on application completeness? Hearing none. Is there anything else, sir, you'd like to say at this time?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Trip Ewer. I'm pleased to be part of a volunteer effort on behalf of the city of New Bern. We prefer to call them urban arbors as opposed to aviary references, but I suppose that with artwork we may call them whatever moves us. Our application is essentially, or I should say exactly the same as we presented in design review. I will remind you that we requested that lighting come back at a future time once those details can be resolved. And then lastly, you asked that I get a letter of authorization from the property owner of Morgan's to attach these items, and I have copies of that here if you care to have one, and certainly Matt.
Yes, Matt would like to have it.
Thank you. Several copies to hand out.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
I'm a low-tech guy.
Okay.
This trip here will. All right. Uh-oh. Just preparing for the next step. So you guys are reading.
Okay, is there anything else you want to say at this point?
No, ma'am. I'm
Okay.
available for any questions you may have.
Okay, all right. Are there any notified proponents, notified opponents? You're a proponent?
I like the idea, but I have a question.
Well, wait a second. Do you have something you want to say? Okay, did you sign in to speak? Okay, so if you would come up to the podium. So you're a proponent of this?
I like the idea, and I don't like the idea. I'm both.
Okay. Well, let's start with what do you like about it? We'll
Okay,
start
I'm
there.
David Blythe, the adjoining property owner on the north side of that alley, for 156 feet, I believe. The right-hand side, across from the beautiful arbors. I love them. I like the design. We have been discussing in different meetings throughout the city for a number of years, at least 20 that I can recall, probably closer to 30, on improving this alley. I was there the day that they took the utility poles down that were in the alley and placed the utilities on the ground. It has been discussed to do further things with those utilities, whether they be placed underground, under the street, under the sidewalk, or relocated. I think this is a great first step to improve that alley. At the same time, I do ask myself and ask you guys in the city of New Bern, is this the best appropriation of funds to improve the looks of that alley? I don't know that anybody has addressed anything on the ground. Is this, and I guess my question is it just the arbors that were, or the, what do you call it?
Yes, it's just the arbors
It's
that we're
just the
looking
arbor
at
for
tonight.
beautification. And then I also heard that in the future there was going to be additional lighting requests, which is fantastic.
Yes.
But my biggest question is the utility boxes that are lined in the alley, as well as the what surface and what material. Is there any plans for that as well?
Well, we wouldn't have anything to do with the utility boxes, so that's not something under our preview. And your other question was what now?
The dirt alley, not being any concrete or brick or anything else.
Well, doesn't it have paving in
As
there?
pavers.
It
No,
has
it does
pavers.
not. It's got mud puddles. It's
No,
nothing.
It's got pavers in the
In the
application.
application.
Oh, it does. I'm sorry. I didn't hear that.
In the application, it does.
I didn't hear that. So it does have brick
Yeah.
pavers?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry. I must have missed that completely.
Yeah, well, we probably just blew right by it, so.
Okay. Well, those are my comments. I'm glad we're going to improve the alley after 30 years.
So if you want some information about the utility boxes, where does he go to, Matt, to ask about those? To
City
the-
manager, yes.
To the city manager?
I think city manager's been involved in that discussion about the boxes.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's who you'd have to go through for that.
Okay.
Okay.
I think it went through this phase of it because there's a grant involved, and we have to, the group involved has to spend that money.
Gotcha.
And so they only put forward this part of the project.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Okay, so we don't have anybody else who wants to speak for or against. Okay, do you want to say anything about what he had said, sir?
Just one last thing to make it clear that there are brick paver edging and the exposed aggregate concrete in the alley as a walking pedestrian surface is part of the application.
It's part of the application, okay? You cleared that up. Okay, do we have anybody with relevant evidence and has standing that wants to speak? Don't hear or see anybody. Do we have anybody from the state, city, or government who wants to speak? We don't have anybody. So we will now then go to your staff findings.
Okay. You'll have to ignore the fact that this says 405 Thompson Street at the top, but it is for the Federal Alley project on behalf of architects of the applicant, and there is no information about them in the National Register inventory and the Sandbeck book. But the project is to include installing wall-mounted arbors, and the lighting has been struck from the project.
Again, based on design review and some of the questions and suggestions, we'd like to bring lighting back at a future time.
Okay. So not lighting. So wall-mounted arbor and paving in the east end of the public right-of-way. So staff submits the following historic district guidelines are appropriate for this application. Public and open spaces 2.2.1, skipping utilities, signage 2.8.1, 2.8.2, modifications 3.2.1, metal 5.3.3, and masonry 5.1.2, and paint 5.4.2. Statements of reason based on the information contained in the application and staff's judgment are: 1, the project is located in a dense fabric development pattern. The project is installing steel arbors onto the side of the brick building and adding paving. 3, the proposed design components and materials meet the requirements and guidelines. 4, the zoning administrator and chief building official have reviewed this project and commented accordingly. And 5, the project is not incongruous with the guidelines. So staff recommends the commission approve this application to include installing wall-mounted arbors and paving in the east end of the public right-of-way.
Okay. Any other comments, sir?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Commissioners, any questions you have about this? Anybody? Any comments? We don't have any. Okay. Can we have a motion? And in this motion, do we have to state the condition that lighting will be brought back at another time? Do we need to?
That can be a separate application.
That'd be a separate application, so we don't have to have that. Okay, so can we have a motion, please?
I move that we find the application for Federal Alley for certificate of appropriateness to be not incongruous with New Bern's Code of Ordinance, sections 15-411 to 15-429, and New Bern's Historic District guidelines based on the following specific guidelines and findings of fact. Public and open spaces 2.2.1, utilities 2.3.6, signage 2.8.1, and 2.8.2, modifications 3.2.1, metal 5.3.3, masonry 5.1.2, and paint 5.4.2. Statements of fact. Projects located in a dense fabric development pattern. The project is installing steel arbors on the side of a brick building. Proposed design components and materials meet the requirements of the guideline, and zoning administrator and chief building official have reviewed the project and commented accordingly. The project's not incongruous with the guidelines.
Thank you, sir. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second over here, Tim? Who? Tony, second. Okay, all of those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed, hearing none, the motion passed. Can I have a motion to issue a COA?
So moved.
So we have so moved. Who's the second?
Second.
Second, Tim. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, hearing none, we will issue the COA. Do I have a motion for Mr. Tripp to come back to the board?
So moved.
Thank you.
Who's the second? You moved? You second? All of those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, you may rejoin us, sir.
First, who did the first motion?
And then the second's over here.
Maybe,
Mhm. Just choose one of them.
yeah.
Okay? Okay, so we've done these 4 items. So item number 5 on the agenda is any old business. And do we have any old business? I don't see anything listed. Nope. Any public comments at this point from anybody in the audience? We don't have many left.
Oh.
What?
There's a question about who's paying for the federal alley project.
Who's paying for it?
Oh, so you could come up and make a general comment, this is that.
Swiss Bear, I think is what he said.
Okay.
Swiss Bear has a grant for it.
Okay.
Okay? All right, so
Any
we.
other comments?
So we're now to item 7, which has to do with 416 with 418 Broad Street, an extension of the COA. Can you give us some information on that?
Yes, so, this project was first approved in 2019, and has had several extensions. The first one usually does not need to be brought before the HVC, but all subsequent ones do. So they're about to come up against their next expiration date. And the most important thing for you is to think about whether or not there have been significant changes to the guidelines that may change either whether or not it should be essentially not extended and therefore expire, or if there may be some to do an extension with additional conditions. Or thirdly, just to vote to extend it with no whatsoever. So those are your kind of 3 options. So as you're looking through the project, think about that. So I will present to you what their presentation was, and then the last extension,
Okay.
COA with the last extension.
All
So
right.
that's their application. So I'm going to show you the drawings, especially since we have some new members since this was first approved. This is a project next to, in the vacant lot next to the fire museum, to the right of the fire museum. And so it's these 4 townhomes on the front and several, in fact, we'll see that in a second, but they provided all these photographs back then. This is essentially the site plan. So on the left is Broad Street, and so there are 4 units facing Broad Street, and then there are 4 units in the back, and essentially it's a different unit because it's facing the same direction as parking. Whereas on the front, there's a front door facing Broad Street and then the garage doors in the back. You'll see that again in a second too. So this is a rendering of the project from Broad Street and the fire museum on the left. Obviously, you can see the second building is to the rear, turned sideways. And you see details of the design. And now the view of the project from the back, from the rear. And so even though the main entrances on the rear building are towards the parking area, they still look the same as the ones that have an entrance off of Broad Street. And provided many more illustrations and all of the floor plans, which are really relevant. These were the elevations they provided, all the various sides, all the various units. And then he shows some product literature. And so this then was the last COA extension. And you can see the zoning administrator, chief building inspector have to sign and make any notes. And we approved it, I think the very first time with the condition that they submit a landscape plan for review and approval as a condition of the COA. So this one was extended to
And we have no list of plantings yet?
No,
Okay, so that's still a condition of the approval.
then it could be if you so choose.
Okay, so
You need a motion to approve the extension?
we do, I was just trying to think, I don't think we've done anything to change our guidelines since then.
Not that I can think of.
Because that was one of the things you said we needed to consider.
Correct.
If that would affect whether or not.
Guidelines in minor ways.
Yeah, so we haven't changed our guidelines, so this, it would still be the same guidelines. Okay, and they're still gonna have to come back with the plantings. So,
Madam Chair, it might be appropriate to have the reason for the extension request on the record.
yes, thank you for reminding me, I always forget to do that. So, do we have a reason? Do we know a reason?
I have an
It's mine.
email, but
Do you want to tell us what the reason is?
I'd be happy to tell you,
oh, yeah.
the owner's reason really is just they were going to start it, and then COVID hit and they didn't start it, and then time got away, and then COVID was still kind of going on, then prices have gone up significantly, and so they really were thinking about pulling a permit before this last one expired. They very much want to get going on the project. They just want a little bit more time to let prices calm down and start the project. Nothing has changed on it. They still very much want to do it and have expressed that to me, and just don't want to feel forced to have to pull a permit by September. That's really the only reason.
So it's due to financial reasons. They haven't gone forward.
I mean, I guess that's a reason, sure.
Well, we got to have a reason, so, you said they're waiting for prices to come home, so financial reasons is one thing. Is that enough that we need, or do we need something else?
Well, that's for you all to decide.
Okay.
If there is a reason that, based on the information you have, warrants another extension, it's in your purview to do so. I think the representative for the applicant has indicated that no permits have been pulled. So ordinarily, a COA would be null and void if you don't pull a permit within 1 year. However, there have been extensions within the time allowed. So you all are the sole arbiters of whether an extension is warranted on these facts.
Could this be a condition that it's a final extension?
Yeah, that was my next question. How many extensions can we do?
So,
Because I said,
it indicates that you can make any extension for any amount of time you want. So you could even extend it for 3 years, or for 3 months, or.
But the number of extensions is fixed? The number of extensions is fixed? Is that what you said?
That's a good
It
question.
doesn't say how many extensions,
Oh.
so.
That's a very good question, Mr. Bixby. So, Code Section 15-428, subsection D indicates, I'm just going to read right out of the code, that, let me see, I want to get to the appropriate portion. So the COA, HPC administrator can extend up to 1 year. Notwithstanding the administrator's authority under this section, the commission, which is you all, is also empowered to grant an extension of a certificate of appropriateness for any length of time deemed appropriate, provided an application for such extension is submitted in writing to the commission prior to the expiration of the original certificate or any extension thereof, which leads me to believe that you can extend extensions. But there's not a hard and fast rule to say you can only have X number of extensions.
that was the question, okay. All right.
And it would only seem relevant, if I may, it would only seem relevant to not extend if a project no longer is congruent. Project is no longer not incongruous with the guidelines.
Yeah.
In other words, the guidelines have changed to the point where the project is no longer appropriate.
All right.
That would really only be a logical reason
And we haven't changed our guidelines since it was originated.
No, we have, but just not in a way that has any effect on this. For example, we added those concrete hog slats for deck, for docks.
Right.
We added the ability to do minors at the DR, at the design review meeting, and things like that.
But that doesn't have anything to do with this.
No, correct.
All right.
And Madam Chair, any extension should be for a reasonable amount of time.
Okay.
So not forever, but certainly a reasonable time.
Okay.
And one other point, Madam Chair, just for full disclosure and transparency, I am the current owner of 409 Hancock Street. I'm not sure whether that is within 100 feet of this project.
I don't think it is.
Okay.
Yeah. Might
Four.
squeak, but I really don't think it is. 60, I think, and then plus the road, or maybe it is.
So I have no problems if someone feels like I need to be recused from the vote just to avoid any potential conflict.
Well, so.
But you didn't get a letter, because the letter wouldn't be sent out about it.
No notice is required, and if the member doesn't have some type of pecuniary interest, I don't see a conflict of interest.
Okay.
Based on the facts that he's saying.
Okay. All right, so what is your discussion on this? Do you want to extend it again for a certain amount of time, depending on looking at if the owners want to go forward with this, to give them a little bit more time due to financial reasons and have them come back in a year?
I think it's reasonable to put a time limit because
Yes.
the guidelines may change.
Yes.
And a year is a reasonable time limit.
Right, in 19 to 20, 22, so it's been 3 years already.
Yeah.
And they've not done anything.
Yeah.
It won't get any cheaper.
Yeah, and I was getting ready to say, I don't know that things are gonna get any cheaper, so we don't need to, keep doing it unless they're gonna do something. So, could we do it, so would somebody make a motion to, do the extension for a year and have them come back in a year?
I move we grant an extension for 416, 418 Broad Street for 1 year from the current date of 9/25/22 for reasons of COVID and other factors.
Second.
All right, so we have a second. All of those in favor? Say aye. Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, so the motion passed.
Thank you very much.
So you have 1 year to come back.
Appreciate it.
Okay? They gotta do something here.
Yeah.
Okay, so item 8 on here is the administrator's report, and he's given us a breakdown of the COAs, of the majors and the minors, which we're aware of. Item B under 8, COA extension issue, since we've just done that.
Well, no, this is, next time you'll have this one on that.
Yes. Okay. Are there any other items that we need to bring up at this point in time? Does anybody have an item? Madam Lawyer, any item on your end?
No, ma'am, not with
Okay.
members tonight.
Matt, any items on your end? Okay. Can we have a motion to adjourn then?
So moved.
Okay, we have a motion to adjourn. Who's second? Second. Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, opposed? Hearing none. We are adjourned.
Stroke of 7.